A woman posted that her boyfriend had died unexpectedly about a year before she wrote the post. She had been in the kind of grief that doesn't follow a schedule, keeping his number in her phone, having moments in ordinary days where she would think of something and want to tell him before remembering she couldn't. She described it not as constant devastation, but as the low-frequency hum that grief settles into after the immediate shock passes. Present, not debilitating, just there. Then, a woman she had never heard of reached out to her. The woman introduced herself by explaining how she knew of the poster, through a small web of mutual connections, through the specific way that information about a person's death travels. And then she explained why she was contacting her. She had also been in a relationship with the boyfriend, a serious long-term relationship, running in parallel with the posters for what she described as almost the entire duration. They compared information. The overlaps were not ambiguous. The poster writes that the first thing she felt was not anger. She was too disoriented for anger. She felt something closer to a structural shift, like discovering a building she had been living in was built on different materials than she had thought, and she needed to recalibrate everything she understood about its weight. She and this other woman had been grieving the same person separately for a year, both of them in real grief, both of them grieving real relationships, neither of them aware the other existed. What she posts about most carefully is what happened to her grief after that conversation. She says she still misses him, she can't turn that off, and she doesn't think forcing herself to would be honest. But the person she misses had not fully existed. The version of him she had loved, the relationship she had believed in, had been constructed on a foundation she wasn't allowed to see. She writes that her grief has become this strange double thing, mourning the person she lost and mourning the version of him she had believed in, and not being entirely sure those are the same loss. She posted because she needed to describe this somewhere and she didn't have language for it. She was hoping someone else might. Several people in the comments said they had experienced similar things, though not in the context of death, discovering after a breakup that the relationship had never been what they believed. They said the specific grief of losing something you didn't know was constructed is its own category, and that it doesn't get talked about enough because it comes wrapped in the complication of feeling like your feelings aren't fully legitimate if the thing you're grieving wasn't fully real. She said that was exactly it, and she still didn't know what to do with it. A babysitter was watching a child at a family's home she'd worked for several times before. She went to use the bathroom and noticed something in the vent above the toilet that didn't look right. She looked closer. It was a small camera, lens pointing directly at the room. She kept completely calm, went back to the child, finished the evening normally. When the parents got home, she said nothing. She went to her car, she called the police. The parents' reaction when confronted was not what she expected. They didn't deny it, they didn't explain it. They went very quiet in a way that she described as more frightening than if they had been angry. The post ended with her saying a police investigation had been opened. She didn't post updates. What stayed with people wasn't just a discovery. It was the detail that she'd been in that bathroom before, multiple times on previous jobs, before she ever found it. A person posted that they had been the one to turn in their own brother to law enforcement. The crime was real, the evidence was real. What their brother did was not something they could stay quiet about. They made the call, he got 25 years. They posted because nobody ever talks about what happens to the person who makes that call. The family fractured, their parents chose a side and it wasn't theirs. Friends who knew the brother disappeared. They became, in the eyes of everyone who knew them, the person who destroyed the family, even though they were the person who tried to protect someone else. They said they would make the same decision again. That wasn't the confession. The confession was that making the right decision had cost them almost everything they had. And nobody, not a single person in their life, had ever once acknowledged that being right doesn't mean it destroys you. The comments were overwhelming. Thousands of people saying they'd never thought about it from that angle. Hundreds of people who said they had been in a similar position and had been waiting for someone to just say it out loud. This one isn't a donut story. It uses a donut to tell a completely different story. A woman had been supporting her boyfriend financially for 2 full years. He had been laid off, said he wanted to transition careers, and she agreed to carry them both while he figured it out. She paid rent, bills, groceries, everything. Meanwhile, he cycled through half attempts at being a YouTuber, a Twitch streamer, a TikTok influencer, none of which he ever took seriously. She gave up getting her nails done, her hair, vacation savings, a house deposit, all of it. 2 days before she posted, she ordered Uber Eats as a treat. She gave him her phone to order whatever he wanted for himself, then ordered her own food after, just a plain donut and a coffee. She got on a work call. When she got off, her food was gone. He had eaten his entire full breakfast meal and then her donut too. Said he'd never seen her order donuts before, so he assumed it was extra. She broke down completely, not because of the donut, because in that one action she saw clearly what 2 years had been. He didn't wait, he didn't ask. He saw unclaimed food and thought only of himself. And she realized she had been unclaimed food this entire time. She posted asking how you leave someone who is completely financially dependent on you and has nowhere to go. The comments called it the most devastating breakup post they'd read that year, not because of drama, because of how quiet the realization was. A man in his early 20s applied for a remote position. The onboarding was entirely through email and was completely chaotic. No one ever assigned him to a team, no one gave him tasks, and nobody reached out to follow up. He waited a few days, then a week, sent a polite email asking for his onboarding details, no response. Tried a different contact, no response. So he decided to wait and see how long it took someone to notice. 3 months later, he was still receiving his paycheck every 2 weeks, had attended 0 meetings, completed 0 tasks, and had not been contacted by anyone at the company. He posted because he didn't know what to do. He said leaving felt wrong, staying felt wrong, saying something felt insane. He said the freedom had been euphoric, and then quietly disturbing, and then something he couldn't describe, like being a ghost inside a machine that didn't know he existed. He said he thought he might cry the day they finally noticed. The comment section was completely divided, half calling it fraud, half calling it the company's problem entirely. He never followed up. The account went quiet. A person posted that they won a significant lottery prize about 10 years ago. Not the kind of money that makes the news, but life-changing money. Enough to quit their job, buy a house outright, retire comfortably. They told nobody. Not their friends, not their family, not their spouse. They kept their job, continued living the same way, invested the money quietly, and watched it grow. Their spouse had no idea. Their family had no idea. They went to work every day, complained about bills with everyone else, and sat on a decade of financial freedom that nobody knew existed. They posted because the weight of it was becoming unbearable. Not guilt exactly, more like a strange loneliness of having a version of your life that no one who knows you has access to. They said they didn't know how to tell their spouse. They said they were afraid of what it would mean about the relationship that they'd kept it this long. The comments ranged from supportive to deeply unsettled. A lot of people said this specific confession bothered them more than the betrayal stories, because this one wasn't about anger or desire, it was just silence. A decade of chosen silence inside a marriage. A man posted that his son needed a liver transplant. He went to get tested as a potential donor. He wasn't a match, not in the way you'd expect from someone who shares half their genetics with their child. The doctors didn't tell him what it meant, but he understood what it meant. His son, who he has raised from birth, who he loves completely, is not his biological child. His wife has never told him. As far as his son is concerned, everything is normal. He posted while sitting in the hospital waiting room. He said he hadn't confronted his wife yet. He said he kept looking at his son through the window of the room and trying to figure out if anything felt different. It didn't. He said that was the part that was destroying him. Not the betrayal, the fact that nothing about how he felt about his son had changed at all. A woman had been keeping a secret from her adult daughter for her daughter's entire life. The man her daughter believed was her father, who had been present, involved, a real presence in her childhood, was not her biological father. Her daughter was in her mid-20s when her mother finally told her. The mother posted saying she had made the decision because her daughter had started asking questions about family medical history, and she was terrified the truth would come out in a worse way. She thought honesty was the right choice. She thought her daughter would be upset, but ultimately grateful. Her daughter stopped speaking to her immediately, changed her number, went completely silent. The mother posted because she didn't know if she'd made the right call. She genuinely didn't know. She kept going back and forth in the comments. People told her she was right to tell her. People told her she should have waited. People told her timing didn't matter, only truth. People told her truth without timing is just destruction. She said she lay awake every night, replaying whether she could have done it differently, whether there was a version where her daughter still called her. A woman, she's in her early 40s, posted to r/true off my chest because she needed to say out loud something she had been sitting with in silence for months. Her marriage was over. Not because of a single dramatic event, not because of cheating or a blowout fight or some sharp turning point, because of 20 years of a man who used his back injury as the reason he couldn't do anything. She explains the dynamic carefully. She's 4'11", her husband is 6'3". From early in their marriage, whenever something physical needed to be done, mowing the lawn, helping with the kids, moving furniture, cleaning, he had a reason he couldn't do it: his back. Always his back. She's not unsympathetic to back pain. She knows it's real and she knows it's brutal. But she also points out that she had multiple back injuries of her own over those same years. Injuries she got doing the tasks he kept handing off to her. And she rehabilitated every single one through physical therapy and sheer stubbornness. When his discs finally deteriorated to the point where surgery became necessary, something in her wanted to believe this was the turning point, that facing something this serious would change the dynamic. She supported him through the diagnosis. She drove him to appointments. She researched his condition. She carried the household, the kids, her job, and his emotional weight at the same time. And she watched him quit physical therapy after a single session. She kept going. She found a trainer, her own 18-year-old son who had gotten into bodybuilding. She lost 20 pounds. She rebuilt her body while running her family. And somewhere in the middle of all of that, she looked at her husband and felt something that wasn't anger or resentment or even sadness. She felt nothing. Not the dramatic nothing of someone in shock, the quiet nothing of someone who has simply used up all the feeling they had left. She posted because she needed to say it before she said it to him. She was filing for divorce, not because of the surgery, because of what the surgery had finally made undeniable, that this had always been the pattern, and the pattern was never going to change. She wrote that the hardest part wasn't the decision. It was understanding that she'd actually made the decision a long time ago. She just hadn't admitted it yet. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive. Thousands of people recognizing something in the description of that specific kind of slow drain. A lot of women said they had been in versions of the same situation and wished they had left sooner. A few people pushed back, saying she was being too harsh. She didn't respond to those. She hasn't posted an update, but the way the original post reads suggests she didn't need to. This one has updates. Multiple updates. And by the third one, even people who were convinced it was fiction said they didn't care anymore. They were too invested to stop reading. It starts with a woman, 42 years old, who had been married to her husband Luke since they were in their 20s. Luke had a childhood best friend named Amy. Amy had been part of the picture from before the marriage. She was close to both of them, officiated their wedding, was integrated into their family in the way that a person can be when they've known someone their entire life. Over the years, Amy raised 4 children alone. She never named the father. Luke and the poster financially supported her through a lot of it, which seemed like something close friends did. The poster had accepted all of this because she trusted both of them, but she had thoughts she kept pushing down. Looking at Amy's kids and noticing things, physical traits, allergies that matched Luke's exactly, the timing of pregnancies against her own timeline. She kept filing these observations somewhere in the back of her mind and closing the drawer, because what she was thinking was something she couldn't afford to be right about. Then, Amy's 17-year-old son started showing romantic interest in the poster's 15-year-old daughter. That was the moment the drawer came all the way open. She posted asking Reddit what to do. The response was immediate: get a DNA test. But before she could put together a plan, she found herself sitting Luke down and asking him directly. His reaction wasn't the flat denial she expected. He was heartbroken in a way that felt specific. Amy, when confronted, was furious, insulted, she said, and refused to allow any of her children to be tested. Luke went to Amy's house that night to, as he put it, do damage control. He stayed overnight. The poster came back with an update the next day. She said she'd been telling herself there was some version of events where this wasn't what it looked like. But a man who responds to being accused of fathering his best friend's children by spending the night at her house, that specific sequence of decisions had started to tell its own story. Then the twist came. In her second update, the poster sat her daughter down to have the most difficult conversation of her young life, explaining that the boy she liked might be her half-brother, that there was something the adults were trying to figure out. Her daughter listened, and then she said something that stopped the room cold. She and the boy, Amy's Tom, had suspected for a long time. They both had grown up noticing the same things the poster had noticed, and their entire romantic interest in each other was a ruse, a deliberate, carefully constructed attempt to force the adults to have the conversation that none of them would have voluntarily. Two teenagers, separately, had decided to fake a relationship to crack open a secret their parents had been maintaining for decades. Reddit did not recover from this reveal for several days. The third update confirmed the poster had gone through Luke's phone and laptop and found exactly what she had feared: intimate messages with Amy, explicit photographs, and multiple references to Amy's children as our children. She served Luke divorce papers. She kicked him out of the house. Amy went silent. The last update is quieter than the others. She's processing what it means to discover that the life you thought you had was operating on a different set of facts the entire time. She says she keeps thinking about what her daughter did, how a teenager understood something about truth and action that the adults around her had been avoiding for decades, and she doesn't know whether to be proud or broken. There's two kinds of betrayals: the ones that happen because someone wants something and takes it, and the ones that happen because someone is drowning and grabs you on the way down. This post is the second kind, which in some ways is harder to be angry about. In other ways is worse. The poster had been living with her roommate for just over a year. They had a straightforward arrangement: split rent down the middle, both paid on time, no real issues. She had no reason to check on the lease status or verify that payments were being made. She trusted the system because she was doing her part, and there was no signal that anything was wrong on the other end. What she didn't know was that her roommate had been dealing with a gambling problem for months. Not just casually, the kind where money disappears in cycles that are impossible to explain. Her roommate had been collecting both halves of the rent and then losing her portion, or spending it, or routing it somewhere else. She had been covering with excuses to the landlord, making partial payments, promising the rest was coming, and all the while her half, her money, was disappearing into a situation she had no knowledge of. The eviction notice had already been filed when her roommate finally sat her down. She told her at home, in person. The poster says her roommate was crying before she even finished the sentence. And the poster, still processing the information, still calculating what this meant for her life, found herself in the bizarre position of watching the person who destroyed her housing situation cry about it, as if she needed to be the one providing comfort. They had 5 days, not to start looking, to be out. Everything had to go somewhere. She had to find an emergency place to stay, figure out what this did to her credit, figure out what she could afford on short notice in a rental market that doesn't reward short notice. The security deposit was gone. She posted because she needed to figure out if she was a bad person for how angry she was. She kept going back and forth. Her roommate had a problem, a real problem. Addiction isn't a character flaw, she said. But she also kept coming back to the same question. Having a problem doesn't mean the person you hurt has to absorb the consequences quietly. Being sympathetic to someone's struggle and being furious at what that struggle cost you, both can be true at the same time. She updated briefly later. She had found a temporary place. She was pursuing whatever legal recourse existed. She hadn't spoken to her roommate again. This is one of those posts that takes a minute to land fully. You read it once and think you understand it. Then you sit with it for a few minutes and realize there are several layers of weight inside it. A parent posted that they had received a message from their son's best friend's family. Not a hostile message, not a complaint or a threat. A message asking, carefully, considerately, with obvious awareness of how difficult this was to send, if they would consider allowing the other family to adopt their son. The parent's son had been spending most of his time at this other family's house for 2 years, not in a crisis intervention way, in the way that sometimes happens when a child finds a place that fits them. He ate dinner there most nights. He slept over on weekends so regularly that he had a drawer in their spare room. He referred to the other parents with names that had a warmth in them the poster recognized as something specific. The other family wasn't making accusations. They weren't going to court. They were extending an offer, and they were doing it directly, person to person, because they loved the child and wanted him to have permanence and stability in the place he had already decided was home. The poster sat with that message for a long time before writing the post, and what they wrote was not what you might expect. There was no immediate outrage. There was something closer to a fracture, a quiet, painful recognition. Because their first reaction wasn't, how dare they? It was, they're not wrong. The poster didn't explain exactly what had been missing in their own home. They didn't lay out a narrative of failure or neglect. They just wrote that something had been absent, depression maybe, or the weight of circumstances, or just the kind of slow drift that can happen in a family without anyone deciding for it to, and their child had found somewhere that filled what was empty. And now they were being asked to make a choice that no language of parenting had prepared them for. They wrote, is fighting this love or is it selfishness? I don't know which one I'm doing. The comments were careful. People recognized the rawness of the post and responded accordingly. A few people shared versions of similar experiences from different angles. Children who had grown up split between two families, adults who had effectively been raised by someone other than their biological parents. Most people said the poster was asking the right question, and that the fact they were asking it said something important about who they were. The poster thanked people and went quiet. No update, just that one post, that one question left sitting in the open. There's a specific kind of horror that lives in the mundane, not the dramatic reveal, the slow rewinding, going back through memories you thought were real and trying to figure out what any of them actually were. A woman posted about her boyfriend. They had been together for a couple of years, and about the Discord server that had been part of her life since she started dating him. It was presented as his friend group, a collection of people he'd met online over the years, the kind of loose community that forms around shared interests. She had joined it early in the relationship and had become genuinely integrated into it. She had conversations. She had inside jokes. She developed what she genuinely believed were individual relationships with multiple people, distinct personalities, distinct histories, distinct senses of humor. She looked forward to being in that server. It was a social space she valued. Then she found out every account in it was her boyfriend. Not one or two, every single one. Every personality she had connected with, every conversation she had found meaningful, every person she had thought she was building a friendship with, all him, operated simultaneously for the entire duration of their relationship. She posted because she was trying to process what category this fell into. She was genuinely uncertain. Was it controlling, a way of keeping her isolated in a social space he completely controlled? Was it a mental health issue, loneliness that had calcified into something compulsive he couldn't stop? Was it something else entirely, something that didn't fit neatly into either of those frames? She said she had gone back through 2 years of conversations after finding out, looking for the seams, the places where the voices might have slipped, where one persona bled into another, where something didn't quite fit the character he had built. She found some. They were subtle, small inconsistencies in phrasing, in reaction timing, in the way certain topics landed differently depending on which account she was talking to. She hadn't seen them at the time. She had been looking for a person in each one. She had found people. She thought she had found people. What haunts her most, she's very clear about this in the post, is not the scale of the deception. It's that some of those conversations were genuinely good. She had genuinely liked talking to some of those accounts. They made her laugh. They gave her advice she had actually used. They had felt like real friendships. And they all had been him the whole time, playing every part, performing an entire social world for one audience. She ended the relationship. What she was still working through when she posted was the question of what any of it had meant. Whether something can be real even if the person you experienced it with didn't exist in the way you believed. She said she didn't have an answer to that yet. I'm putting this one here because after everything else on this list, it is genuinely the palate cleanser you need. Also because the way it escalates from funny confession to existential spiral is its own kind of art. A person posted that they had entered a community bake sale competition. They had not baked. They had gone to a supermarket, purchased a box of cupcakes, transferred them to their own container, added some extra frosting decoration with a piping bag they owned, and presented them as their own work. They won first place. The judges praised the flavor. Competing bakers came over and complimented the texture. A local food blogger who was covering the event asked them for the recipe. They made up something plausible on the spot, and the blogger wrote it down. They received a trophy, a physical, tangible, engraved trophy that now sits on a shelf in their home. The guilt, they said, was not immediate. It crept up over several months. Every time they looked at the trophy, every time they thought about the people who had actually baked, who had gotten up early and made something from scratch and had not won, every time they imagined the blogger publishing the made-up recipe and someone trying to make it and wondering what they were doing wrong. They posted because they needed to confess to someone, and the internet seemed like the safest option. They were very clear, twice, that they were not returning the trophy. The comment section erupted. The responses ranged from, "This is the funniest thing I've read all year," to, "You need to come clean and give it back immediately," to, "I don't know why this is bothering me as much as it is." Several people said the detail about the blogger asking for the recipe was the part that had them genuinely unsettled. One person asked if the blogger had published it and whether anyone had tried to make the fake recipe. This spawned a whole thread that went nowhere but was deeply invested in going nowhere. The poster replied once more, reiterating that the trophy was staying, then went quiet. The post has more upvotes than most things posted that week on the entire subreddit. People relate to it in a way they can't fully explain, which itself says something interesting about what confession actually does for people. Sometimes you just need to put the thing out into the world, even when the thing is that you cheated at a bake sale and have no intention of making it right. This post is genuinely one of the best pieces of writing to come out of Reddit in 2024, and I say that with full sincerity. It opens with a single sentence: "I gaslight my husband when we fight." The immediate reaction in the comments before anyone had read further was a wave of deeply concerned responses. People preparing to give serious advice, therapist recommendations, divorce warnings. The word gaslighting was being taken at full weight and treated accordingly. Then people read the rest of the post. The poster explains that she and her husband have been together for 8 years, both 30 years old. Every single morning, without exception, she makes him a peanut butter and jelly sandwich to take to work. Has done for years. Grape jelly, always grape jelly. He likes grape jelly. When they have a fight, and she specifies this carefully, only when she feels he hasn't properly apologized or hasn't fully understood what he did, she makes his sandwich the next morning with strawberry jelly instead of grape. She says nothing. She packages it exactly the same. He takes it to work. He eats it. He comes home slightly off, slightly puzzled, not quite able to identify why his lunch felt wrong. She watches him across the dinner table knowing exactly why his lunch felt wrong. She finds this deeply, privately satisfying. He has never noticed. She has been doing this for years. The post is her confessing because she can't tell anyone in her life with the risk of him finding out, and she needed to share it with someone. The comments were a collective exhale so large you could feel it through the screen. People went from concern to absolute delight within the span of a sentence. The post became one of the most shared things on Reddit that month. People sent it to their partners. People sent it to their parents. Someone's grandmother apparently saw it and said it was very sensible. Hundreds of people confessed to variations of the same thing in the comments. Small, completely harmless acts of silent recalibration that happen in long relationships and that nobody ever talks about because they're too ridiculous to admit. The food blogger from Story 18 probably would have appreciated this one. The poster engaged with comments for a while, clearly delighted. She confirmed that she had no intention of ever telling him, and that she was looking forward to the day she finally does just to see his face. He has, as far as anyone knows, still not been told.
When people talk about betrayal, they usually mean one person. This story is about what happens when the betrayal is plural, when multiple people you trusted make a choice that costs you everything, and the people around you respond by asking you to be understanding about it. The original post comes from a woman who found out her younger sister had been having an affair with her husband. Not a coworker, not someone she barely knew. Her sister, someone who had been in her home regularly, who her children called their aunt, who had been at birthday parties and holidays and the ordinary fabric of her family's life for years. She doesn't go into extensive detail about how she found out. That's not the focus of the post. What she focuses on is the aftermath, and specifically the way her family responded. There was not a clean, unified front of outrage. There was a complicated mess of people trying to keep the peace. There were relatives who pulled her aside separately to suggest that these things happen in marriages, and that she should think carefully before making permanent decisions. There was a suggestion, delivered gently by someone who meant well, that she consider whether there were things in her marriage that had perhaps led her husband to look elsewhere. And then there was her mother's phone call, in which her mother said, carefully, that she hoped her daughter would eventually find it in herself to forgive her sister, for the sake of the family. The poster wrote that sentence out in full, and then let it sit there for a moment before continuing. She said those words, for the sake of the family, told her something she hadn't been willing to fully acknowledge before, that the family she had understood herself to be a central part of had a different set of priorities than she had assumed, that she was being asked to do the emotional labor of forgiveness so that the family could return to a shape that was comfortable for everyone else. She filed for divorce. She cut off her sister, not in a dramatic, formal declaration, but simply by not responding and not making space. The posts that follow over the next several months trace the slow, difficult process of rebuilding a life when two of the foundational structures of that life, her marriage and her family, have both, in different ways, chosen something other than her. What's remarkable about how she writes is that she's not performing bitterness. She's not composing a takedown. She's just describing what happened in sequence with the quiet steadiness of someone who has already processed most of the anger and is now living in the longer work of figuring out what comes next. This one starts as a regular workday and becomes something else entirely in the span of 30 minutes. A woman works at a WIC office. That's the government program that provides food and nutrition support to mothers and infants. She's only been at this particular county office for a month after transferring to another location. Routine morning. A woman calls in asking to sign up for WIC, says she just had a baby. The WIC worker starts building the profile, gets the woman's name, the baby's details, then asks if she wants to add a second parent or guardian. The caller says yes, her fiancé. She gives his name, common enough name. Then his birthday, same as her husband's. She keeps her voice neutral and tells the caller they need a photo ID from both parents for verification. It takes 30 minutes for the caller to forward the fiancé's ID. The woman on the other end of that call is looking at a photo of her husband in a Tommy Bahama shirt she bought him for his birthday. The baby is 2 weeks old. Her husband has been away on business for 3 weeks. They have been trying to have a baby for 3 years. She has had multiple miscarriages. She says she's not heartbroken. She's numb. She can't process it. Her coworkers can tell something is wrong, but she can't say the words yet. She posted this from her work computer because she had nowhere else to put it. The post went massively viral. Hundreds of thousands of people read it. The comments filled up within hours. Updates came later. But that first post, written in real time while still sitting at her desk, still clocked in, is the one people couldn't stop sharing. A man posted that he and his best friend had been completely inseparable growing up. Every weekend, every summer, the kind of friendship that felt permanent. Then when they were around 19, 20, the friend just went cold. No explanation. Stopped responding to messages, stopped showing up, eventually disappeared entirely. He assumed he'd done something wrong and never found out what. He spent years replaying moments, trying to identify the thing he must have said. He carried that confusion and hurt for 8 years. Then they ran into each other, and his former best friend broke down and told him what had actually happened. His friend had been in love with him, had been for years, and when he realized those feelings weren't going away and weren't going to be returned, he made the decision to disappear completely rather than ruin what they had by saying something. 8 years of silence. 8 years of the other person not knowing there had been a reason at all. The man who posted said he didn't know what to do with this information. He was grateful to know, but he was also sitting with the weight of 8 years of someone carrying something alone because they were trying to protect him.
Before anything else, this post is not about a crisis. The woman who wrote it is careful to say that. She's not in danger. She's not making a medical decision. She's doing something that is, in its own way, braver and harder than either of those things. She's being honest. She's 4 weeks from her due date when she posts. The pregnancy has been planned, as much as anything ever fully is. The people in her life know. There has been a shower, there are things set up in a room that will become a nursery. The infrastructure of expecting a baby is in place. And somewhere in the final stretch of all of that, she reached the point of clarity that she describes as arriving quietly, without drama, like something she had been thinking around for months finally moving to the front of her mind where she couldn't not look at it. She had changed her mind. Not in the pregnancy in a medical sense, she was 36 weeks along and she knew what that meant in terms of her options, but about what she wanted, about what she actually wanted separate from what had been assumed, planned, scaffolded around her. She writes about the difference between a decision made in earlier circumstances and the slow accumulation of honest self-knowledge that sometimes arrives too late to act on cleanly. She couldn't say this to anyone in her physical life, not her partner, not her family, not her doctor. The weight of what those conversations would require, the fear, the judgment, the machinery of concern that would mobilize immediately, was too much to face. So she said it to Reddit, anonymously in the middle of the night from the sound of it. The comments ranged across every possible position: supportive, angry, concerned, compassionate in different ways for different reasons. Some people asked what she was going to do, practically. Some people said she should speak to a counselor. Some people said what she was feeling was more common than anyone admits, and not wanting something doesn't make you a bad person. She engaged with a few responses, then went quiet. She never came back to update. People in the thread still occasionally return to it and leave a comment into the void. Just a word or two, checking in on someone they never knew, who said something honest at a moment when honesty cost her a great deal, and then disappeared. Most relationship endings have a moment, a conversation, a discovery, a door closing. This one describes something different, the long, slow period before the end that nobody ever talks about, when you can see exactly what is happening and you stay anyway, and you don't fully understand why. A woman posted about the last few months of her relationship. She and her boyfriend had been together for a while. She doesn't give a specific number. And there had been a period of what she calls gradual subtraction. He became slightly less present, slightly more distracted. The quality of attention she had been used to started having gaps in it, small ones at first, the kind you can explain away as stress or work or the ordinary ebbs that happen in long relationships. Then a name started appearing, not in a dramatic, caught-out way, just in the texture of things, a reference in passing, a reason he needed to be somewhere, a shift in the quality of his phone use that she noticed without being able to articulate exactly what had changed. She knew, not from proof, from the specific knowledge that accumulates when you've been paying close attention to someone for a long time, and suddenly something in the pattern is different. She knew what it meant even before she could have explained what she was observing. And she didn't leave. She posted trying to understand why. She wasn't in denial. She was clear with herself about what she was watching. She wasn't paralyzed by fear exactly. She described it as something more like a suspended state, knowing the end was there, not being able to make herself walk towards it. She kept showing up, kept sleeping in his bed, kept existing inside the relationship while whatever this other thing grew around her. She writes that the loneliness of that period was unlike anything she had experienced. Not the loneliness of being alone, she knew what that felt like. The loneliness of being completely present and completely invisible at the same time. Of lying next to someone every night who was directing the best of themselves somewhere else, while she was right there, and they both knew it, and neither of them said it. She finally left. She posted after she had already gone. She wasn't asking what to do anymore. She was trying to describe something she felt hadn't been described accurately anywhere. The specific quality of the middle. Not the betrayal, not the ending. The long stretch of knowing and staying and feeling yourself become gradually less real in the space you're still physically occupying. The comments recognized it immediately. An overwhelming number of people said they had been in some version of that middle, that it's one of the most common experiences of the end of a relationship and one of the least discussed because it doesn't have the clean shape of a dramatic ending. It just has the weight of it. She said thank you to people, said she was okay, said she just needed it to exist somewhere outside of her head.